and welcome to SkySwitch University. In this unit, we want to cover the setup, management, and testing of 911 services. Now, as a reseller, it's going to be very important for you to understand 911 now that you will be setting 911 up for your customers. You need to know how to set it up, how to manage it, how to test it to ensure that your customers are properly set up for 911 calling. Now let's look first at your MSA. I'm going to pull up an MSA here. Now you'll need to consult your MSA, but for all our resellers, there's an E911 services rider in your MSA. Now we point out at the beginning that you can use your own 911 service provider if in fact you want to. There is a setup fee for that because it does take some configuration for you to use your own 911 services. Now, our 911 services are set up for continental US and Canada. And here under the important notice, you'll see that we point out it is the responsibility of the reseller to ensure that all end users have correct 911 caller ID information entered in the PBX. And if that is not set up correctly, your callers would not be able to make 911 calls. And so in the case of an emergency, of course, you want to have that set up properly so your customers can make those calls. We also have a testing number, 933, that you can use, and we'll deal with that in a few minutes. All right, so I just want to point out your E911 services rider in your MSA so you can take time to read it and understand your responsibilities as a reseller. Now, let's move on to the Dash Manager and talk about setting up 911 services on a particular number. Now you can set up 911 services on a DID, a regular DID or number, or it could be on a toll-free number. It doesn't matter. Either or you can set it up for. Now let's take this number here in particular, and as far as the managed DIDs, or what we refer to as the DID portal, there's going to be separate training on how to engage the DID portal, how to purchase DIDs, porting of numbers, and those things. But today we're going to focus in this session on 911 services. Now, in setting up 911 services, there are two steps. Step one is to add and validate the emergency address information for the number in managed DIDs. And then step two is to set the 911 caller ID on the user's profile in Managed PBX. So now let's look at adding and validating that emergency address information. That's step one. Okay, so in the Dash Manager, we're going to click on Manage DIDs. Now, again, there's going to be a separate training on the DID portals. So at this moment, we're going to just focus on accomplishing that first step of setting the emergency address information on the user, on that particular number. So the number I'm working with is 469-795 number. It's this 7310. Okay, so as you click under the column services, you can see what services have been defined on the number. Now I have routed the number into the PBX, into the particular domain that we're working in. Okay, but for now, and that's why it shows PBX in the services column. But if you notice, it does not show E911. So if you do not have E911 set, the emergency address information set on a number, it will not appear here. So how do we set that emergency address information? Well, we click on this plus sign here. Looks like just an emergency sign. And as you notice, as you mouse over it, it says Edit E911. So let's click on it. And what we want to enter is the emergency address information for that particular number. All right, so I'm going to use my address here. And I want you to notice, this is a little tricky. This first box is just asking for the street number. The second field is asking for the street name. And I'm going to put drive and location. There's no suite or floor, but if there were, like in a business, you would put that here. I'm just going to put Brister here, and we're in Allen, Texas, zip code, and your state set. And then what we want to do is we want to validate this address. What this is doing is it's going out to our 911 database, checking the address, make sure we have it correct. If the database sees something a little different, it'll put these boxes in green. So what it basically did was it made them in all caps. All right, but what it'll do is it'll correct. If it finds the address, it'll correct anything and put it in green. But we see that we have success. Automatically corrected address to valid address. So the address has been validated. Now all we need to do is apply the address, the emergency address, to this number. You notice you're getting a notification up here to the top right in Managed EIDs, and it gave us a success. So now if I click on Show Services on our number, it's not only going to show that I've routed it into the PBX, but it's also going to show that I have E911 services set up on that number. Now, the second step was to then set the 911 caller ID on the user's profile in Manage PBX. Let me go back to the Dash Manager, and we'll see that we need to go into the PBX, and we need to go into the domain and into the user's profile that this number is associated with. Now let me talk about setting E911 emergency address information for a company. Typically what happens is you're going to have a company that will have a single location. They'll have 10, 20, 30, whatever number of people working at a single location, and typically they'll have a main number. Well, in that case, you could set the emergency address information up on the main number, and then just apply that main number in the 911 caller ID field on each of the users. That way you're only having to pay for one E911 fee instead of for multiple E911 fees. So let me click on phone user 200. I'm just going to apply it to this particular user. Now if you notice, we went to the user's profile page, and here's the caller ID information area. Now the information that is here was pulled from the domain default information. Now let me talk about that a moment. So if I go up here and I edit settings of the domain, we're going to find on the defaults tab, we're going to find that information. The 817, here's your caller ID number and your 911 caller ID. So the caller ID is every call that any of the phones on that user makes outbound. This is the number that it's going to be display outbound. When any of the phones on that user calls 911, it's going to display this number. All right, but these are the defaults that were set when we added the domain. And you can set defaults, and when you create users, they will then accept those defaults. Let me also state here that you can, if you want, put all zeros, 10 zeros in this 911 caller ID field. And what it will do is it will basically block 911 calls. So you may use that practice in the process of setting up a user. Set it to 10 zeros, it would block 911 calls. They would just get a busy signal when they try to make a 911 call. But you, of course, need to be very careful with that, because you would need to let your customer understand that 911 caller ID is temporarily blocked until you get the true 911 caller ID information in there, as far as the emergency address, and the correct number in this 911 caller ID field. But just understand that when you go to set 911 caller ID on a user, the numbers that are here came from the default settings of the domain. Now, we're going to set, I'm going to set the caller ID information, and I'm going to set the E911 caller ID to the number that we just put the information, emergency information on. All right, so more than likely this may be the caller ID of the company, or the main number of the company, or it could be that you have a user here that maybe works from home, and this is the user's DID, and so you would put the user's home information on their DID in order to display the correct emergency address information when the user makes that call. Okay, so this is the second step to ensuring that you've set up 911 caller ID, for a user. All right, so I'll save that, and as we go back to our PowerPoint, again, we'll see that the two steps were to, number one, set that, add and validate the emergency address information for the number in Manage DIDs, and then we went over to Manage PBX and we set the 911 caller ID on the user's profile, in Manage PBX. So those are the two steps to ensure. Now, you can always test that information by making a 933 call. We have an emergency 911 caller ID test at 933. So any of the phones, you could call 933 once you have that emergency address information set up, and you can make that call. I'm going to play it right now so you'll hear what it sounds like. I'll just call it from my phone.
911 test system. Your account is in live mode. Your subscriber identifier is 46932000800. Your location is currently provisioned. The location coverage will be Enhanced 911. Your address is 921 Garden Park Drive, apartment 243, Allen, Texas 75013. After the tone, please record a brief message. The recorded message will be played back to you afterwards.
Test.
Test. Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay, so that is the 933 emergency test system that we have. And from any phone, once you notice how it said that your account is live. Okay, if it did not have the emergency address information, it would say that it's not live. And so you would know that you have not set up the emergency address information correct yet. Okay, so why is that important? As you look at this screen here, you'll notice that I'm pointing out two types of emergency calls, 911 calls. When you have the emergency address information set up properly on a number, in Managed IDs, you have the emergency address information set up, and then on the user, you have the 911 caller ID field set up with the number, and they make an outbound 911 call. It's going to go to the local PSAP, which is the public safety answering point in the 911 system. And that call is going to cost you, as the reseller, 99 cents. Now, of course, you can charge for 911 calls, and we can help set that up in billing services. But I just want you to understand that that's a typical 911 call. It's going to go to that local emergency service zone PSAP, and it's only going to cost the reseller 99 cents. And everything's going to work properly. The reason it went to the local emergency PSAP is because the local address information was transmitted with the call. Now, if the call does not have the emergency address information added to the number, and a phone from that number on that user makes a 911 call, then that's considered a unregistered 911 call. And that call is going to cost the reseller $150. And that's why it's very important that you have it's not only important to, you know, the customer and the potential emergency that they're having, but it's also important to you because of the cost. There's going to be a $150 charge. Now, why is it a $150 charge? Because when they made the 911 call and the emergency address information was not with the call, was not on the number, then it has to go to the National Emergency Center Services Call Center because they don't know where that call is coming from. It could be from any address in the United States, continental U.S. or Canada. And so they have to send it to the National Emergency Services Call Center, and these folks are trained to handle calls like that and to help figure out where this person is calling from. And so, therefore, the $150 charge. So that's why it's very important, you know, to have that emergency address information set on every number in every customer, not only just for the emergency situation that the customer could be in, but you know, it's going to be important for you as a reseller as well. Now, back on the user's profile, I want to point out a new feature that we have. We had this request a good bit, and in our last release, we released this feature. So when you go to the user and you go to the Phones tab of the user, you now have the ability, so like we don't have any phones here registered, but anytime you edit the main extension here or you add a phone, you're going to see this 911 caller ID field on each particular device. This is how you can set 911 caller ID per device. So let's say you have a customer, an executive that has a phone on his desk in the office, but then he has a phone at home or at his lake house or something like that. We have that happen a lot. And what we can do is we can use a different outbound caller ID. It would require using a different DID. And you would put the emergency address, the different address, right? Let's say on his home phone, you would put his home address on a DID, and then you would put that DID in this field if this was his home phone. And then if he had an office at his lake home, he could have even a different address on that device, but you would still need that additional, you know, DID to do that in order to outpulse that 911 caller ID, you know, to the local service center. That way, it would, you know, send that emergency address information when he's at home or when he's at his lake home. So you can now set 911 caller ID per device using this field. If you don't put anything in the field, it's going to use what's on the user profile. All right, so that's one of our new features that has been released. So I'd like to end with reporting. Now, on the in the Managed PBX, I want to point out a report because I get this question. Okay, how do I know, you know, what's set up on what numbers? Now, if you notice on your inventory page, you can export your phone numbers, and it'll show the available treatment, the destination, and any notes. So if you've put notes here, you can export your numbers out here. And you can also do that at your when you view all your domains or all your customers. So this inventory here across all your customers would display all your numbers. You know, yes, like I just said, across all your customers, you could export that, and then you would have all your numbers that are in the PBX. Now, we encourage you to always use managed DIDs as the top level inventory. Always add numbers in managed DIDs. If you're going to spoof caller ID, there's a separate video for that, separate course. And if you're going to purchase numbers, of course, or your porting numbers, they're going to be listed in here. Make this your managed inventory in managed DIDs as your main inventory. Now, you can then, you have a phone numbers report here at the bottom that you can pull, and here's your E911 report. Your E911 report will show all the numbers that you've set E911 up on, and it'll show the address information on those numbers. So let me pull that report real quick so you can see that. And that's going to show you, like I said, just the numbers that you've set E911 up on and the address information for those numbers, the emergency address information. So our dev department's working on additional reporting capability, but from those reports, from your managed PDX export report of all your numbers, and from your phone numbers report and your E911 report here, you can get, all the information that you need regarding all your numbers. As a reseller, as you start getting a good list of customers in your reseller account, you're going to end up with a lot of numbers, and so it's important to be able to pull a report and see and ensure, what, for example, what accounts do you have E911 set up on, etc. And we see right there at the top, that's that number we just set it up on moments ago, and here's the others. All right, so that's a little bit on reporting. And I will point out our document here. Here's our document in the SkySwitch knowledge base. You're going to make sure you want to read this and understand it. But again, it's important as a reseller to understand your 911 responsibilities and to ensure that you set these up properly and have these procedures in your installation, your conversion procedures when you're setting up your customers. If you have any questions, you can send those to onboarding@skyswitch.com. Thank you very much.